Throughout US history, the nation's internal politics often determined their external politics. Their policy of isolationism caused them to follow the treaty's naval limitations until the beginning of World War II. In July 1940, President Roosevelt signed the Two-Ocean Naval Act, in accordance with which the total tonnage of warships would increase by 70% in one go. The awesome production capabilities of the USA allowed them to easily implement all of their designed naval projects and plans. It was the only country among all naval superpowers that took part in the war to manage that in wartime conditions. The US Navy followed the worldwide trend of building heavy ships in the 1930s and experienced a severe shortage of light cruisers at the beginning of World War II. Before the USA joined the war, they had started developing ships that were designed for joint operations with destroyers.
The Atlanta-class cruisers, developed within the framework of the London Naval Treaty of 1936, were planned as fast-moving reconnaissance cruisers, and their design was geared towards countering Japanese destroyers. The main battery of the first 4 cruisers of the series, including Atlanta, comprised 8 coupled turret mounts with dual-purpose 127mm Mark 12 guns, which had a firing rate of 22 shots per minute. Atlanta could fire 10,560 kilograms of metal per minute with her main battery guns. Few light cruisers of that time had such firepower. Cleveland was laid down in 1940 and would become the lead ship of the most mass-produced series of light cruisers. She was based on the project of the Brooklyn-class, which had already served in the Navy, but needed its design to be reworked due to the outbreak of war in Europe. While designing Cleveland, naval engineers took into account the experience of new military tactics that had emerged. For example, a triple bottom increased the cruiser's survivability in cases of magnetic mine detonations and proximity fused torpedo hits, while the increased threat of airborne attacks resulted in significant enhancement of the anti-aircraft armament. Between 1942 to 1946, out of 52 ordered cruisers, 29 entered service, and of them, 22 had active combat roles during World War II.
By the autumn of 1939, Americans had begun to create heavy cruisers that would meet the needs of the war. However, due to a severe shortage of time, it was impossible to design a new ship from scratch. That's why heavy cruiser Wichita, which was built in the middle of the 1930s, served as the basis for a new class.
When the Baltimore-class cruisers entered service in 1941, they were the largest heavy cruisers in the world, with a full displacement of more than 17,000 tons and length of 205 meters. Such dimensions allowed for improvements to the ship's seakeeping characteristics and stability, and also increased cruising range. In the opinion of many specialists, the Baltimore-class cruisers were the most balanced ships of World War II in terms of armament, armor, and cruising characteristics. Alaska is a representative of a special ship type known as large cruisers in the USA. Additionally, the availability of 305mm main battery guns made her more than just a heavy cruiser and more similar to battleships. The design process began in 1940, and her primary purpose was to counter rumored new Japanese heavy cruisers that never ended up being built. Because of that, Alaska was instead utilized as an escort for fast-moving aircraft carrier task forces.
One of the sites in Buffalo, New York State, is USS Little Rock, stationed at the local Naval Museum. It is the last remaining Cleveland-class light cruiser. Built in great numbers, these ships boasted good survivability and were considered the heaviest light cruisers in the history of the US Navy. Key specifications of the Cleveland-class cruisers: Total displacement up to 14,300 tons. Length 610 feet 3 inches. Beam 65 feet 7 inches. Draft 24 feet 7 inches. Armament, primary armament, 12 Mark 16 guns in 4 turrets, caliber 6 inch. Dual purpose artillery, 12 Mark 12 guns, caliber 5 inch. Anti-aircraft artillery. Different ships of the series were equipped with up to 28 Bofors and up to 20 Oerlikon autocannons. Armor belt and conning tower, up to 5 inches. Deck, 2 inches. Turrets, up to 6.5 inches. Air group, 4 float planes. Maximum speed, 32.5 knots. Cruising range, 11,000 nautical miles. In the evening of November the 1st, 1943, an imposing Japanese squadron left for Bougainville. It consisted of heavy cruisers Miyoko and Haguro, light cruisers Agano and Sendai, 6 destroyers and 5 transport ships carrying 1,000 troops. The Japanese force was to land on the island and defeat the US Marines, who had just been deployed to the coast of the Empress Augusta Bay. Late into the small hours, a column of Clevelands was moving along the coast of Bougainville. The US cruisers were in front of the Empress Augusta Bay when at 2:30, their radars detected a Japanese squadron comprising 6 destroyers and 4 cruisers. The US force, led by Admiral Merrill, deployed into combat formation, and its destroyers attacked the enemy. At 2:46, the US destroyers made their first torpedo salvo, but the Japanese ships changed their course, and the torpedoes launched by the Fletchers missed the targets. However, the maneuver broke the Japanese formation and sent it into disarray. This is when the Clevelands opened fire at cruiser Sendai. Primary armament shells severely damaged the Japanese ship. In this turmoil, heavy cruiser Miyoko ran into a friendly destroyer, cutting off part of her bow. Having fired from their primary guns, the Japanese cruisers revealed themselves to the Clevelands, who immediately returned fire. The Japanese heavy cruisers suffered a defeat and retreated under the cover of darkness. The Clevelands came out of this night battle as decidedly victorious. USS Little Rock is the last remaining ship of her class. She served as a missile cruiser until the summer of 1977, when she was decommissioned. Today, the former squadron flagship is a museum in Buffalo, and her menacing appearance embodies the pride and glory of all Clevelands.
Hi, I'm Jason Hill, a Verizon employee and Army veteran. Verizon has made it a mission to give more to those who give the most to our country. And today we're here to talk about how gaming has the power to give more than just fun to our veterans. All right, Dave, tell us about your military service.
Jason, thanks for asking, man. So I served in January of 2003 to September of 2009. Served as an imaging intelligence analyst. What'd you do in the military?
U.S. Army for 5 years, 19 kilo. I was a tanker on the Abrams.
Oh, nice.
So what kind of challenges were you faced with when you left the military?
So leaving the military, unbeknownst to a lot of veterans that leave, they don't fully understand what they're leaving. You lose that community. You lose that person that you can call and say, hey, I got a question for you. Hey, can you help me with this? For me, I lost all that stuff, and I didn't realize it until I started regaining my community back through gaming, which, having this virtual environment, having this community that's been built by Woodward Project, is amazing. It's a VFW community hall for our generation. right? A lot of our generation don't necessarily have the time to go to VFW to connect with other veterans. Most of us work 8 to 10 hours a day, and we just don't have time, right? So the gaming community helps me with my work-life balance and fun.
So what advice would you give other veterans that maybe want to dip their toe in this and try and check it out?
The first thing I want to say to all veterans is that, look, it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay not to reach out and say you're not okay. There's something called Discord out there. And actually, Wounded Warrior Project stood up a Discord server, I believe back in January of this year. That Discord server is manned from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. by Wounded Warrior Project. There's always somebody there. They have all of their resources available to you. And we're out there with open arms. We're out there to help people. You have a challenge that you're going through. I guarantee you that there's going to be somebody else who's gone through that, who's got themselves out of that hole, and let them carry you. The only people that know your actual name is the teammates themselves. That's it.
For me personally, social media and the gaming environments have given me that platform in which I could actually reconnect with these people that meant so much to me. And so the importance of finding other veterans and being able to connect with them and have those conversations is invaluable.
I know for me, those 3 or 4 years when I got out of the military, it was by far the hardest it's ever been. I was actually begging to go back in the military, to go back to deployment, because deployment was easy.
Tying that back into the gaming community now, suddenly you've got an identity again, right? Like I'm ex-Tanker 98. It's just you finally found somebody that speaks your language. And I think that's probably a big part of being part of that gaming community and feeling connected.
And that's the biggest thing is I use this as talk therapy. And I think a lot of Wounded Warrior Project alumni that I've helped get on streaming, I tell them that.
That's another thing about the military, right? Take a knee and drink water. You sprain an ankle, take a knee and drink water. Or you're feeling sad today, take a knee and drink water. Nobody has time for it there. So you learn how to bury that stuff. You learn how to suppress that stuff. And then you get back out into the real world and it's like, wow, there are resources if you look for them. There are people there that are willing to help you if you look for them. And I see that as an awesome opportunity for the gaming community to come together and help people rekindle those types of emotions and find them and talk about it.
Yeah, most definitely, man. And thanks for sharing that with me. I appreciate you. One of the things when you're deployed, or even when you go from military base to military base, there's always a morale, recreation, and welfare area, right? And there are always games there.
We actually had a PlayStation in our Quonset hut, right? So the tent itself. We took a couple of car seats out of vehicles that we found abandoned on the side of the road. And so we had 2 front seats of a vehicle in front of a wood box that had a tube television and an old school PlayStation.
Nice, man.
All right, Dave, I'm somebody that's sitting at home. I watched this interview and I want to get involved. Where are you going to direct me to get started?
So there's a bunch of places you can go. The first thing is that the Wounded Warrior Project Discord server, especially if you're a disabled veteran or a veteran about to get out of the military, definitely join that. It's abundance of resources. It's manned from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. The next thing, too, is if you guys want to start streaming, just hop on and start doing it. If you guys Google Wounded Warrior Project Play, it'll take you straight to the homepage to get you set up for the Discord as well as the program that's going on.
Dave, man, it's awesome. It was great meeting you today. I really appreciate everything you're doing and keep moving forward.
Jason, thanks for having me, man. I don't think I've actually met a tanker, so I'm going to check that off my bucket list, man.
And for veterans and viewers at home who want to know how you can tap into veteran gaming resources or get involved in supporting the cause, stay tuned. We'll be talking more with experts from both World of Warships and the Wounded Warrior Project to give you all the tips and resources you'll need. You can also donate to Wounded Warrior during the Parade of Ships, and Verizon will be matching all the funds we raise. Thanks again to Dave, and I'll see you soon.
Hi, I'm Happa Fodder, one of the North America community managers for World of Warships and a retired Chief Petty Officer in the United States Navy. I spent over 20 years in the United States Navy across 5 different vessels, 10 deployments, and an entire year in Iraq. When I retired in August of 2018, I was pushed by several of my friends to apply to be the community manager for the North America team for World of Warships, as I had run multiple communities throughout my time for the past decade. Being a Chief Petty Officer in the United States Navy gave me a set of skills that allowed me to have a better understanding of how to communicate information up and down the chain of command, which is essentially what the community manager does. right now. I take the feedback from the community, I compile it all together, and I send it up to our development team and our management, and then I take news releases and informational releases from the management and development team, and I release that information out to you, the players, our community. One of my things that I look forward to the most, and the thing that excites me the most, is being able to talk to the community on a regular basis. People are my passion. Though I did love World of Warships starting a long time ago in alpha testing, I've grown to enjoy the community more than the game itself. It allows me to be able to engage with the community and understand that a very large portion of our community is veterans, either retired, currently active duty, or prior service. Whether that's an airman, a marine, sailor, soldier, Coast Guard, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's from the United States Armed Forces or any of the other active duty or reserve forces throughout the globe. We all share a commonality of the fact that we all served at some point. Oftentimes, a lot of the drive that you have to play a certain ship might have been because you had a relative or someone you knew that served on that vessel, and that's a connection that we all can grow to love and understand. My favorite ship right now is the USS Benham, and it's quickly being eclipsed by the USS Somers, but I'll always be a destroyer main, as that's what my first ship in the United States Navy was a destroyer.
Battleships, with their indestructible armor and huge, powerful guns, were considered to be the main force at sea and were quite instrumental in international politics in the first half of the 20th century. During World War I, and in the period of several years prior to it, the USA built 12 so-called standard battleships with such primary characteristics as strong armor, powerful guns with a caliber of between 356 and 406 millimeters, depending on their type, oil boiler heating, and a maximum speed of 21 knots. The Washington Naval Treaty limited the development of battleships for almost 15 years, and these agreements were reconsidered only in the middle of the 1930s. At this point, the leading naval superpowers started to design and build a new generation of battleships. Their designs made the standard US battleships seem obsolete, but their combat potential was still considerable.
North Carolina was the first US battleship of a new generation. The Battleships project was designed within the framework of the London Naval Treaty of 1930, which limited the displacement of battleships to 35,000 tons. The ship met the primary requirements of the Navy. She could travel at speeds of up to 30 knots, withstand hits of 356mm shells, and originally had the same gun caliber. However, after Japan had refused to sign a new treaty in 1936, it was decided to arm the ship with 406mm guns. Her armor was left unchanged. Before North Carolina was laid down in October 1937, the design process for the South Dakota-class battleships, with Massachusetts being one of them, had started. The designers removed the main shortcoming of previous ships, an unbalanced ratio between the armor and main battery. However, they preserved standard displacement within the limits between 35,000 and 38,000 tons and maintained a speed of at least 27 knots. To improve the armor while staying within the displacement limits, the ship's length was shortened, thus reducing the length of the armored citadel and making it thicker. Combined with a sloped armored belt, the battleship was protected against 406mm shells. The Iowa-class battleships are considered to be the pinnacle of US shipbuilding in the 1940s. Thanks to the shape of the hull, with a long bow end and enhanced propulsion, the battleships had a displacement of more than 57,000 tons and could reach speeds of up to 33 knots. The 9 new 406mm Mark VII guns were extremely powerful and among the best in their class. 4 Iowa-class battleships were built between 1940 to 1944, and they took part in military actions in the Pacific Ocean from January 1944. At 9:30 a.m. on September 2nd, 1945, World War II ended when Japan signed their capitulation on board Battleship Missouri.
One day, a buddy of mine came down and he says they was taking volunteers for the Battleship Washington. And the two of us signed up, volunteered for the Battleship Washington. And we wound up in the Marshall Islands, and he went aboard the Washington and I went aboard the Iowa. That was in March of 1944, right after the ship got out here. As near as I can tell you, I wanted to be a part of the action because I had very good duty there on the sub base. My buddy and I just decided, well, we'd like to get out and get into the action. Well, we did. General MacArthur ordered Japan to send out 9 of their top dignitaries out to sea, get on a destroyer to escort us in through Sagami-Wan into Tokyo Bay. He wasn't going to take no chances. We was also in general quarters because going through Sagami-Wan to go into Tokyo Bay, MacArthur had ordered a white flag, as near as I can remember, a white flag flying from all of the gun emplacements on the hills on the side of Sagami-Wan. And they said, boy, they look like a sheet up there. And this destroyer came out and got aboard. I can't remember the name of the destroyer. And they got aboard and they led us in. The Missouri went in right behind the destroyer, and then we followed the Missouri in. And when we anchored in Tokyo Bay, yeah, we was a little ways from, but we was able to watch the signing of the peace treaty. We felt that it should have been signed on the Iowa, but it wasn't. And we were just glad to see it signed, and we were there when it was signed and was real happy about it.
Now, it was easy enough for the rest of the people to get into the captain's gig and climb down, but Roosevelt was in a wheelchair. And the boatswain chief boatswain mate was making a chair to attach to a rope to lift the president up and over, but the chair didn't arrive in time. And Roosevelt knew that the captain's gig was being beat up by the currents against the side of the ship. So he reached up and grabbed the rope and said, "Hoist away." And they said, "Well, Mr. President, we ordered a boatswain's chair to come up to take you off." And he said, "I said, hoist away." And he reached up, grabbed that rope, and with himself, pulled himself up in midair. And they hoisted him over that way, and he got down that way, and then the boatswain's chair arrived. It was too late. I commissioned the Iowa, and was along with the training of the crew before she was actually finished. And then we came down to New York, and we boarded her and took her out on her commission, and that's where I learned that's when we fired the guns on the Iowa and learned that we couldn't fire them all at one time because this ship shook like a destroyer did. When we fired them all, the captain ordered the guns, the main turrets, 15 degrees off the starboard bow and 15 inches degrees up, all three, and they ordered them all to fire at the same time. And they did, and I was in the anti-aircraft battery, and I was standing in sky control, and I had a raincoat on, and the concussion of that broke a button off my raincoat. And that's when we learned that they had to do something, and they fixed the main battery to where I think it's 0.6 of a second fire all the individual guns. And now you can't fire them all at one time. They all got about 0.6 of a second difference.
I was aboard when President Roosevelt was aboard. He had Harry Hopkins with him, his right-hand man. He had General George Marshall, head of the Army. He had General Hap Arnold, head of the Air Force. And he had Admirals King and Admiral Leahy, head of the Navy.
You remember seeing the president when he came on board?
Yes, I was on the deck division, 7th Deck Division, when we took him aboard. I was as close to him as I am to the camera. And they brought him aboard in a boatswain's chair. And there's a chief petty officer waiting with a wheelchair to put the president in the chair. The president could not walk. And anytime you saw him, he was held up by something because he couldn't stand alone. And we're the only ship in the Navy that had a bathtub. And we had the bathtub because President Roosevelt had to take a bath. And they still have that bathtub aboard the ship. We were taking them to Mirs El Kabir, which is part of Algiers. And before we were in the Caribbean Sea, and the Willie D. Porter was a brand new destroyer with new men and new officers aboard. And we wanted to exercise at general quarters for Franklin D. Roosevelt and all of the admirals and generals that he had aboard. The Willie D. Porter, they wanted to exercise at general quarters too, and they had their torpedo trained on the Iowa. And someone accidentally tripped the torpedo. And when that happened, they yelled, "Lion!" That was a code name for the Iowa. "Lion, lion, lion. Torpedo to starboard. This is no drill." And with that, the Iowa went into a hard right turn, and the guns, I was a brand new ensign on the main deck, and right above me were 20 millimeters and 40 millimeters and 5-inch guns, and they all started firing at that torpedo. And that was right over my head. I thought, I'm too young to die. And with that, after that happened, the Willie D. Porter was the only ship in the Navy that ever had the entire crew court-martialed. They had to go to Bermuda, and they had a trial, and they deemed that it was an accident, that torpedo was tripped. And with that, the Willie D. Porter went to serve in the North Sea, and it served up there for several months. And then it went to the South Pacific, and the Willie D. Porter was struck by Kamikaze and sunk. We bombarded Saipan, Guam, and Tinian. And at the time, the natives on the island, they had been told by the Japanese that the Americans were very ruthless, and it scared them. What they did, they got up on the edge of a large cliff, and the first ones to jump were the children, and then the women, and then the men. And we had anchored off of Saipan or Tinian. We got up the next morning, and there were these bodies floating up against the ship. They took the hose and they washed the bodies away from the ship.
Massachusetts was one of the last of the treaty battleship series. She's of the South Dakota class, and these were fairly balanced ships in terms of armament, armor, and speed performance, which could be created within the treaty limits.
Specifications. Length, 207.5 meters. Beam, 33 meters. Draft, almost 9 meters. Total displacement, 45,216 tons. The main power plant was arranged in echelons across 4 compartments, each having 2 Babcock and Wilcox boilers and a set of General Electric geared turbines. Power, 135,000 HP. Armor, main armor belt, 310 millimeters. Main armor deck, from 146 to 154 millimeters. The armor on the turrets was 184 to 457 millimeters thick. Conning tower, from 102 to 406 millimeters. Armament. The primary armament consisted of 9 Mark VI guns placed in 3 triple turrets. Caliber, 406 millimeters. Dual-purpose artillery, 10 coaxial Mark 12 guns, caliber 127 millimeters. Small caliber anti-aircraft artillery, 6 quadruple Bofors guns, caliber 40 millimeters. 35 single Oerlikon autocannons, caliber 20 millimeters. Air Group, 3 Vought OS-2U Kingfisher aircraft. Cruising range, 15,000 miles at 15 knots. During her service in the war, the battleship covered 225,000 miles, fought 35 battles, sank 5 enemy ships, and shot down 18 airplanes. In 1965, the citizens of the state raised $50,000, which gave this World War II veteran a second life as a museum ship. Main specifications of Battleship North Carolina. Length, 222 meters. Beam, almost 32 meters. Draft, more than 9.5 meters. Total displacement, 44,800 tons. Main power plant, 4 compartments with 2 Babcock and Wilcox boilers each, and a set of General Electric steam turbines. Armor, main armor belt, up to 305 millimeters. The main armored deck, 140 millimeters. Turrets were protected with armor from 178 millimeters to 406 millimeters thick. Conning tower from 178 to 406 millimeters. Armament, primary armament, 9 Mark VI guns with a caliber of 406 millimeter, installed in 3 triple turrets.
This whole ship was designed to be a stable firing platform for these guns. These guns could fire every 30 seconds. So imagine 9 shells, each weighing 2,700 pounds.
Purpose artillery, 10 coaxial Mark 12 mounts, caliber 127 millimeter, 10 times 2.
And they could fire against surface targets, that is shore bombardment, enemy ships, and the most important role they had for the North Carolina was in the anti-aircraft role. Battleship North Carolina was credited with shooting down 24 airplanes. Those are, of course, only the confirmed kills.
Anti-aircraft artillery, 4 quadruple mounts, caliber 28 millimeter, 12 machine guns, caliber 12.7 millimeter.
North Carolina, in her history, never got a chance to go up against an enemy battleship. But she did fire almost 2,500 rounds against shore targets as part of an amphibious assault.
Giving you a quick update of where we stand and where we're going over the next 5 years or so. We're right in the middle of the COVID crisis here in the city of Los Angeles. Of course, in the city and what we do as a tourist attraction and a museum has been affected tremendously by this crisis, and we've seen our museum attendance numbers drop by almost 90% at times. We're seeing some small rebound, but we continue to be affected by that. But luckily, we are changing our business. We are blessed to have an amazing crew of both staff and volunteers, and we're going virtual. We're going virtual with a virtual tour that will be very engaging. That should be released in November here, and hopefully at the time of your event. We're also going to do more virtual engagements. Things like meeting with experts in different areas and professionals, and do some excellent things. I'm most excited about seeing what we do with Vicky the dog. If you know about Vicky the dog, Vicky was our mascot in the 1940s, and we are going to bring Vicky alive virtually for everybody across the world to experience Vicky. This is the first steps in a major transition for us. Many of you know that we've been designated as the National Museum of the Surface Navy, the largest community in the United States Navy, representing millions of sailors and thousands of vessels. That designation is going through Congress and Senate right now. We've licensed the name from the Navy, but officially going through a congressional designation on the House and the Senate side as we speak. That's going to be an amazing transition for us. We plan to open the museum in 2025, and of course we will have a virtual portion of that museum as well. It will be an opportunity for every one of you, whether you're in the United States or whether you're across the oceans in Europe or Asia or anywhere else throughout the world, to engage with the National Museum of the Surface Navy and be able to be part of the legacy and story of the Battleship Iowa and the future National Museum of the Surface Navy here. You can do so today by going online and signing up for our free plank owner certificate. Want to be an earlier supporter of it? Go to the surfacenavymuseum.org, sign up for your free certificate as a plank owner, and you will be part of the founding group of members for the National Museum. So in the meantime, enjoy an amazing rest of your 2020, and we truly appreciate your support, and enjoy wargaming.net. Great program, great partner to be involved with. Thank you all.
Veterans Day is so meaningful to me, especially here aboard the Iowa. For 33 years ago, here on the decks of the Iowa is where I started my Navy career. The path from Iowa to Iowa has a lot of twists and turns in it, but I am so privileged and proud to be back here as the Chief Technical Officer for the museum. And I'm really excited to announce our 360-degree virtual tour. With this tour, you'll be able to walk the decks of the Iowa, see all of our tour spaces, see all of our exhibits, and ultimately slip behind the ropes and get a little bit behind the scenes. And there might be a few other Easter eggs in there if you're diligent and you look to find them. Happy Veterans Day, and thank you again to World of Warships and wargaming.net for putting on this fantastic virtual Fleet Week 2020.
Hi folks, I'm Pops from Pops Place. I've been asked to tell a little bit about my naval career, and I do want to say that my naval career started when I was about 24 years old, and I joined the Navy. I already had a family, and I had a beautiful wife, still have, and a son at the time when I went to boot camp in 1977. I was in the Navy for about 17 years. I got offered an early retirement package, which I took. And during that time, I spent about, I was on ships, surface ships, 3 different ones. Throughout that time frame, I spent 5 years on the USS William V. Pratt DDG-44. I spent another 5 years on the USS Leyte Gulf CG-55, and then I spent 2 years on the USS Nassau LHA-4, and that one was during Desert Storm. My Navy career got me to see all kinds of parts of the world. I really enjoyed the travel and the sea life that was, it's just fabulous. And I got to see faraway places like Egypt, the pyramids, Israel. I got into Jerusalem, the catacombs in Rome, of course, the Colosseum, St. Peter's, been crossed the Arctic Circle 3 times. So I'm part of the Blue Nose, Order of the Blue Nose. I've been to England, Turkey, Greece, France, Italy, all over the Mediterranean area during my career, and had a great time doing it. And I'd do it again, given the opportunity. And I appreciate all that time I spent in the service of my country and what I believe in. So that's a little bit about my Navy career. A couple years ago, I actually retired from a civilian career a few years back, and I was messing around with some part-time work and, just trying to make ends meet. And I decided I'd pick up streaming, and actually, I found World of Warships, and I think it was through a Facebook postings. Something come up about World of Warships, and I went, wow, that sounds right up my alley. I'm going to give it a check out and see what that's all about. So I was introduced to World of Warships back in September of 2018. So I've been playing World of Warships now for about 2 years. I've gained a lot of friends. I've gotten a lot of experience with the game, etc., etc. And then, I think it was December of 2018 is when I actually officially started streaming at the urgence of my middle son, who calls me Pops. And he says, Pops, you really need to give this streaming thing a chance. Give it a try. I think you'd be really good at it. So in December of 2018, I fired up a stream and I started my streaming career, if you will. It took me quite a while to get my feet on the ground and whatnot, but eventually I did. I kept at it, and World of Warships picked me up as a community contributor, which was a huge milestone. And I can't tell you the amount of gratitude I have for World of Warships and what they've done to help me during my retirement. But anyway, that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. So if you want to check me out, stop in, see me at Pop's Place. This is Pops signing off.
In 1906, the British battleship Dreadnought was launched, and naval shipbuilding changed forever. Long-range weapons, new optics, fire control systems, steam turbine, cemented armor, this ship became a sensation in naval circles and an appellative for the battleship class. With its appearance, the great naval arms race began. Which country would build the most powerful warship?
The New York class, which Texas is a part of, were the next evolution down the road. They were super dreadnought. They were dreadnought plus. She was involved at the invasion of North Africa, invasion of southern France. She was at D-Day, June 6, 1944, and ongoing. And then she eventually moved over to the Pacific, where she served both Iwo Jima and Okinawa.
The main event in the USS Texas's career was her participation in opening a second front, the landing of Allied troops in northern France in the summer of 1944. Despite the enormous superiority of the Anglo-American forces at sea and in the air, Well-sheltered enemy positions on the ground were keeping Allied troopers landing on the Normandy coast under heavy fire, causing heavy casualties and not allowing them to move forward. Texas was able to come close to the shore and maintain direct fire from all her guns. By that time, Texas's armament was already far behind comparing to the latest battleship's range of fire. But the commander found an original solution to this problem. He flooded part of the torpedo protection pools, tilting the ship and increasing the elevation angle of the guns. This adjustment allowed the USS Texas to strike all of her planned targets. Battleship Texas would fire more than 500 rounds, allowing the Allies were able to gain a foothold on the shore and expand it. Texas is a truly unique ship. It came into commission before the First World War and is the only United States battleship which took part in the Second World on 3 major theaters of war, in Africa, Europe, and the Pacific. Today, this armored giant is standing on eternal parking at the pier in San Jacinto Port, personifying the force and naval power of the first half of the 20th century. In 1940, a successful attack by English deck aviation on the naval base in Taranto demonstrated the powerful strike potential of aircraft carriers. The following year, a devastating attack by Japanese aviation on Pearl Harbor became the reason why the USA joined the war. On December 7, 1941, the USA had only 8 aircraft carriers in their navy, but they ended the war with almost 100 of such ships, which had played a major role in American success in the Pacific Ocean.
The Yorktown-class carriers, including Enterprise, were known as one of the best carrier classes by the time their lead ship had entered service in 1937. In contrast to their predecessors, the ships had balanced offensive and defensive capabilities. They could reach high speeds of up to 32.5 knots and launch aircraft groups pretty quickly, thanks to 2 catapults on board. Enterprise carried 5 aircraft squadrons with a total number of up to 85 machines.
Anyone who plays World of Warships knows you can't go it alone. Teamwork is a key component of the game, and the camaraderie that starts in matches often spills out of it. Hi, I'm Jason Hill, a Verizon employee and Army veteran. Welcome to the second segment of Verizon's Healthy Competition series, where we're going to talk to Sean Matthews, a veteran who now serves as a community contributor for World of Warships. Thanks for being here, Sean.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. It's just great being among other veterans.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's great to talk to you, and we appreciate your time as well. So let's start off by telling me a little bit about what you do for World of Warships.
So I'm a community contributor, and what that is I'm a content creator. To be able to do this and connect with the gaming community, it's been a dream come true. So I'm just amazed that I have this opportunity.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So what sucked you into World of Warships in the first place?
I guess that love of naval warfare is kind of what got me into the game. I knew the ships in the game, and just the ability to play something like the USS Iowa, it was awesome.
So speaking of military history, Sean, tell me a little bit about your background.
So I enlisted just after September 11th. I was still in college at the time. So I walked down to the recruiting office. I was probably the easiest recruit they ever had. I said, sign me up. Been in for 18 and a half years now, and I'll probably try and stretch it out as long as I can.
Yeah, everybody's got their recruiter story, right? And coming back to the gaming world a little bit, let's talk a little bit about mental health support in the gaming community and how that interacts.
I think we all know we're in a unique situation right now with COVID. Everybody is somewhat secluded, detached from the outside world. And when you talk about community, I think World of Warships, and that's the players that get together and talk with each other. And I think that's where the game comes in for veterans as well, because veterans have the ability to do that as well.
I understand you have some other background through mental health services and things like that as well.
One of the units I got to sent me to a course called Master Resiliency Training. The course basically deals with resiliency and the ability to bounce back from adversity. So the Army made a push, seeing that the amount of suicides and PTSD and mental health disorders they were having. They sat and said, hey, we need a better way to help soldiers avoid this and bounce back from that adversity so that when something big comes up, they're able to deal with it better rather than breaking. Resiliency is very important right now, not just for the military, but everyone's.
What are maybe some of the things that you might want to look out for? So maybe there is somebody that's out there that's struggling, that's a fellow veteran.
And I think that's one thing in the military in the past we were never good at, but we're finally learning that we need to do. We need to be more direct with our friends, more direct with individuals that we think might be hurting. And it's not always easy to ask someone if they're hurting or if they're not doing good. And in the same respect, it's not always easy to tell someone that you're hurting either. But now more than ever, it's important to do that. So then this is drawing from resiliency training. We have to have the bravery to be able to ask those hard questions and say, hey, man, are you okay? Are you thinking about something you shouldn't be thinking about? And then from there, we need to react.
I love that saying, it's okay not to be okay, right? And having those conversations with friends, with other veterans, with even family members, whoever it may be, identifying that you need to get a professional involved, right? And there's no shame in that, and there shouldn't be. And I think that's the stigma that, us tough military guys need to get over, right? So explain to me a little bit on how you feel about how important the mental health community and World of Warships and their community and how they collide.
Even if you don't know you're doing it, you're still building that resilience by playing, by getting in there with other individuals, by joining a clan. So a lot of veterans might be out there doing this and not even realizing that they are bettering themselves and building up that resiliency just by playing World of Warships. And I think that's really amazing. It's community building. It's showing individuals, just me talking right here, hopefully veterans seeing this and saying, hey, there's a game that other veterans play. I can join in. And for those individuals, I said my in-game name is No Zoop for you. If you ever see me, please say hi or just reach out to me, message me in-game. You're more than welcome to. I don't care. I'll say hi and, we can chat or talk about military or whatever else. Those are where mental health and gaming collide when individuals get together and, they just play. I don't think I can say more than that. Just play the game, talk with each other, be open with each other, enjoy it. And by doing that, you're building resiliency and you're not even knowing it.
All right. I'm the new guy, right? I'm going to fire up my gaming console tonight. I'm going to get into this. How do you suggest I start?
World of Warships is out there on console, which is awesome. You just do a search for it, World of Warships. You'll find it. You can download it through Steam, or you can go to worldofwarships.com, and it's a free download. It's really unique in that sense that you can get to the top not spending a penny.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it, Sean.
And it's made me realize a lot, too, especially with how much the community means to me as well. So I want to thank you for the opportunity bringing me out for this. And once again, just thank you for your service, and to all the other veterans out there, especially the wounded warriors. Thank you for everything you've done for this country.
I want to thank you for your time today. It's really been great talking to you. Verizon is a big believer in the veteran community, which is why we're a top hire of veterans like myself and family members of service people. So it's great to hear about other places like World of Warships where that community is thriving. Verizon's healthy competition isn't done yet, though. We'll be back later to talk with Matthew Twigg of Wounded Warrior Project about their gaming initiative and ways you can get involved as a veteran or supporter. And don't forget, Verizon is matching donations to Wounded Warrior Project throughout virtual Fleet Week's Parade of Ships, up to $250,000. So make sure to contribute if you can. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.
My name is No Zoop for You. I'm a World of Warships community contributor, and I'm also a veteran. I'm a major in the Army Reserves. I've been serving for 18 years now. I got my start enlisted in the Oklahoma National Guard as an 11 Bravo infantryman. Graduated from Oklahoma State in 06 and got my commission there. And I deployed to Iraq in 09 to 10. Left there, was awarded the Bronze Star, and I've been serving stateside ever since. I think the very cool part about this community, the wargaming and World of Warships community, is the amount of veterans that are in the community. It seems like every day I run into someone who has a gamer tag that's military related, or they've got a sly reference in there, and I just look at it and know, hey, you know, you've served, I can tell. And I think that's really cool. So having a very veteran-friendly gaming community is always awesome, especially being a veteran in that environment. And, you know, I also love going out to the various events that World of Warships puts on. USS Massachusetts, New Jersey, things like that, and going out and actually meeting veterans there and talking about service, you know, from each branch, Navy, Marines, Army, Air Force. So it's a very cool connection that we've got and that World of Warships fosters. And I would say that's one of the more enjoyable aspects about the game. If I could say one thing to the veterans out there, it's thank you for your service. And, you know, if you do happen upon me in a game, feel free to reach out, say, hey, you know, there's a lot of us out there, whether you realize it or not, that are playing this game. And I think that's really awesome. So anyhow, happy Veterans Day. Thanks for everything you've done, and I'll catch you all later. Zoop out.
Something happened. So in 1941, there was a war raging in Europe, in Asia, and also in Europe. What were your feelings about America possibly getting involved into this World War?
Well, I was convinced we were going to get involved. Even before I joined the Navy, I remember seeing the first B-17 at the Cleveland Air Races. And it was announced then it was being constructed for the future, for future use against any potential enemy. And we could see who the potential enemy was.
Yeah, you'd seen the newsreels.
Oh, absolutely.
What was going on in Asia, what was going on in Europe with Hitler and Mussolini.
But we weren't privileged to a lot of information. Of course, a enlisted man doesn't know too much about what's going on in Washington.
So, December 7th, 1941, describe to me how that day began for you. What were you doing prior to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor that morning? Where were you and what were you doing?
Well, the night before, I'd been on Liberty, Waikiki Beach, nice hotel. Had to be back before 11, or by 11 o'clock.
Curfew.
That applied to everybody. So everybody was back aboard the station or ships by 11 o'clock. And at that time, the Japs were surrounding the island, 21 service submarines, big subs, getting ready for the next
attack.
7 o'clock, 8
And
o'clock.
at 07:50, 300 hours Hawaii local time, the Japanese attack begins. Where were you at that moment? And when did you realize the attack was for real?
Well,
what did you do?
I was sound asleep in the enlisted barracks with about 20 other guys. We thought the noise was a drill and really ticked off, using some choice words to describe how we felt. And then a guy said, "Damn, there goes a Jap torpedo plane." So we knew we were at war. Just flew by our window about 100 feet away. So we knew we were at war. And my God, they had no opposition. They took out the battleships. The high altitude guys went after the ones that battleships that the torpedo planes couldn't reach.
Complete surprise, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
How far were you from Battleship Row from?
A little less than a mile.
So you could hear the bombs falling and exploding.
Oh yeah, you
gunfire.
could see the
You could
torpedoes. I saw seven torpedoes hit the Oklahoma. And then I saw the high altitude guy take out the Arizona. See, they had 25 high altitude bombers to drop 25 bombs on 3 battleships that the torpedo planes couldn't reach. And it was one of them that hit the Arizona. When she was hit, 50 tons of black powder were ignited, and she just raised up a huge ball of fire. You could feel the concussion. It just shook us. We were a mile away. It was that concussion that really killed practically every man aboard ship.
And what were you told by your leaders to do at this time?
Well, we watched it for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then went below because we had no battle station. See what we could do. We started to help the guys coming in, were being brought in, survivors being picked up from the burning oil. And then we were ordered outside to go to the Cass and the Downs as a firefighting party because they had been bombed or burning in dry dock with the battleship Pennsylvania. And the only real combat I saw was when we were strafed getting into the truck, and for some reason the Jap just didn't connect. Almost, but God was with us. And then we worked on the fires till about 9:30, and the Japs were bombing and strafing the Pennsylvania, and they were just about 100 feet away from us making their runs. A little nervous time, but came out okay.
You said you saw the Nevada making for the sea, right?
Oh, before, yeah. They nearly sank her in the channel, and if they had, we would have had a major problem. But she was ordered to go underground before she sank, and that worked out all right.
So describe the aftermath of the attack. What damage could you see?
Well, I thought we had lost the war. I did see the burning ships, and the burning oil. You know, it was just looked like total disaster to me. And how in the world could we go on? We've lost all these ships, and I was squirting water and feeling sorry for our country and thought we'd had it. And well, I didn't know that a third strike had been canceled, which the strike commander was awarded. He made the most serious military blunder of any Japanese military commander when he canceled out that third strike. If he had sent that strike in, it would have taken out the shipyard, the submarine base, submarine tenders, sink pack fleet headquarters, all the fuel that was topside would have been bombed, and right on top it would have
easy target.
It would have caught fire, of course, and most of that oil, burning oil, would have gone down over the naval station, particularly the submarine base and sink pack fleet headquarters. And he didn't send them in. If he had, we would have lost the Battle of Midway, because we wouldn't have had Yorktown. She couldn't have been repaired. But she was damaged in Battle of Coral Sea in May of 1942. And it was a month after that that the Midway battle occurred.
So what were some of your concerns and fears after knowing that we were now at war? Were you worried about a possible invasion of the Hawaiian Islands by the Japanese?
Oh yeah, all the rest of the day all we heard were rumors about Japs landing on the other side of the island. And you darn well we were concerned. We had no idea. There was no radio contact. All the radio stations were off the air. And that night, I was walking a post, and it was just about dusk. It was dark. It was dark. Heard these aircraft. Oh my God, the Japs are going to come after us tonight. And never did see them. And then kept hearing the engines more and more. Then suddenly somebody fired one shot and the sky lit up, just red, you know. And I don't know what they were shooting at. I never did see the aircraft. I don't think the guys that were doing shooting, most of them didn't see a target, but they got rid of some pent-up emotion. But we shot down 4 of 6 Enterprise aircraft. Had been out searching for the Japanese. Couldn't make it back to their ship. They had to land at our air station. And they were told to turn on their lights so they wouldn't, you know, be identification. That didn't help. But that was the last action of Pearl Harbor that I recall. Is that
friendly fire?
Oh,
4 of them, you say?
Yes. But those guys had been out searching for the Japs. Never saw them. Never made it back.
And when were you able to notify your family back home that you were okay and that you were not a casualty of the attack?
Well, it was a while before they consented that I sent a telegram to my mother. I don't know when she received it, how long it took, but it wasn't right away. So.
And why wasn't it right away?
Because they couldn't, the service had been disrupted, or telegrams. At least there was a delay, and I assumed it was right there.
So there was a whole stack ahead
Sure,
of you waiting
yeah.
to go out?
Yeah, but that wasn't priority. That was not a priority. The priority was what the heck's going to happen, how we were adjusting.
I'd like to welcome you here to the VB-19 Ready Room. This is one of our very historic exhibits. This right here, actually, when this exhibit was dedicated, we had some surviving members of VB-19 present for the dedication, and this is something we love sharing with our guests. But this is a great time to talk about the storied history of the USS Lexington, the 5th ship in the U.S. Navy to have that name. The USS Lexington commissioned in 1943. Pretty much after shakedown, went straight to the Pacific and into the war. And they didn't waste a lot of time back then. They had to get into the fight. So they were already fighting their first battles with skirmishes off Tarawa in September of 1943. It unfortunately was hit by a torpedo on the 5th of December 1943. Luckily, not too many people injured or killed from that. But then into 1944, after retrofit, back into the fight. And then in, of course, the famous Battle of Philippine Sea, June of 1944, what was called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, USS Lexington was right there. Admiral Mitchell was using this ship as his flagship, And that's where the story comes from the Mission Beyond Darkness. And you can look that up, but that's just an amazing test of heroism of the crew at the time, and also the leadership that was shown by the admiral in charge at the time in order to turn on the lights and bring everybody home safely. Later that year, the ship was damaged again by a Kamikaze attack. That was the 4th of November, 1944. And then throughout the rest of the war, fought very admirably, crew served admirably. But then in August of 1945, the USS Lexington was the first aircraft carrier into Tokyo Bay, first aircraft carrier Tokyo Bay. So, really throughout the majority of the fight in World War II, the Lexington was there. After some renovations in the 50s, it became, into the jet age. And it was operationally serving, not really in combat anymore after that, but then all the way to 1962, after its last mission was part of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but then 1962, it became the training carrier for the Navy. And so, this ship did not serve operationally during Vietnam, but they will say that every jet pilot on carriers during Vietnam did their carrier qualifications here on the USS Lexington, and served as the training carrier for the Navy until 1991 when it was decommissioned. So because of that long service, the USS Lexington ended up being the longest serving SS-class carrier, and at the time of decommissioning was the longest serving aircraft carrier in the history of the Navy. So we're very proud of those things. It's a historic ship. We love sharing it with people. But then right closely afterwards, it became a museum right here in Corpus Christi. And this is one of the things that we love talking about, because that amazing stuff that we have in history that we're commemorating for our guests is something that we carry over now into sharing it with you at this museum. And so we've had a lot of success with that. Of course, now with COVID, you understand the constrictions that are restrictions that are there with COVID. That's why we're doing this virtual Fleet Week. And that is something that affects, obviously, our attendance here. So we have lower attendance than normal as people are slowly getting back into getting out and exploring things with their families. But so we're finding new ways to do fundraising, because it's important to keep this museum alive and keep the history of these great folks who fought and sometimes died on board this ship in the service of this country. So some great events like, of course, the virtual Fleet Week that you're in now. Hope you're having a great time with that. But also we did a virtual concert on the flight deck with Brian Black. Hey Brian, if you're watching this, that was just an amazing time. We had a lot of fun with it, and it turned out to be a great fundraiser. And we're looking for more unique ways to continue doing things like that in order to preserve this history. And we hope that that's something that we can share with you. We welcome you on board the USS Lexington. Enjoy your time with the virtual Fleet Week, but hope that you'll come here with your family and you can share it firsthand.
The USS Midway was an engineering marvel when it was commissioned right at the end of World War II. It took 5 years to design, 90 tons of blueprints, only 17 months to build.
Specifications of aircraft carrier Midway. Length, about 295 meters. Beam, 41 meters. Total displacement, about 60,000 tons. The power plant consisted of 4 turbines and 12 boilers, which produced 212,000 horsepower and allowed the huge carrier to produce a speed of 33 knots. As compared to its predecessors, Midway boasted imposing armor. No American carrier had ever been protected so well. Flight deck, 89 millimeters. Conning tower, 89 to 165 millimeters. To improve the ship's stability, her armor belt was different on her port and starboard side, 193 and 178 millimeters thick, respectively. Armament. The ship was equipped with the most advanced versatile guns ever used in aircraft carriers. These were 18 127mm Mark 16 guns in single mounts, designed for Montana-class battleships. The aircraft carrier also had 21 quadruple Bofors, 40mm guns, and 20 coaxial Oerlikon 20mm cannons. Midway was designed to carry 136 aircraft, such as Vought F-4U Corsair fighters, Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighters, Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, cruising range 15,000 miles at 15 knots.
Midway served for 47 years, the longest serving carrier of the 20th century. In that time, more innovations took place, including the angled flight deck, testing autopilot technology that we all benefit from today. It was something that really set the stage for future generations of aircraft carriers that began with the Forrestal in 1955.
USS Midway stayed in the public eye throughout her entire career, but even after being decommissioned, she continues to draw people's attention. Her mission now is to preserve the history of the US Navy and share it with anyone who visits her in San Diego, California.
I've just returned from a 51,000-mile cruise in what used to be the Japanese Ocean.
Al Hansen, and was an aviation machinist mate, 3rd class. This is called a bloodship. This is if we crashed, and it's not printed on your jacket, it's in your pocket, because you don't know the Japanese from the Chinese. And this is just say, I'm a good guy, take me to your leader, you'll be rewarded. When the Chinese come aboard this ship and see that, they go crazy. They give me hugs, the women give me kisses on the cheek. It's unbelievable.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
Jack Scott. I was an electrician's mate, 2nd class in World War II. Talk about dog tags. They have your name and your rate and your service number, 817-4565. That's something you'll never forget in your life. You'll never forget your service number. What we did at the invasion of Normandy, as bodies would float around, we would go out and tie ammo to the corpse and then leave it sink and take the small tag off so you have proof of who the body was.
My fellow Americans, Supreme Allied Commander General MacArthur, and Allied representatives on the Battleship Missouri in Tokyo Bay.
I was in an island in the Philippines called Palawan, and when the war ended, that's where we were.
We were in transit, having just come out of the Panama Canal, and we're headed up to San Diego.
And of course the war ended right in the middle of that.
Well, when I heard the news, I was in the engine room of the USS Thompson.
It was very exciting, but the whole idea was, we can go home. So they gave everybody an option. You can stay in the Navy and get your wings, or you can get out. I stayed in.
Everyone was glad you were home, and everyone was glad the war was over. It was a lot to be thankful for.
Hello, I'm Carl Zingheim, the staff historian for the USS Midway Museum, and I'm speaking to you from atop the flight deck on the Midway in San Diego, California. The USS Midway is the only surviving example of the capital ship designs that naval architects were looking forward to after the collapse of the Washington and London Naval Treaty System in 1937. Now, freed from all the arbitrary tonnage restrictions that they had to contend with earlier designs, in the post-treaty era, U.S. naval architects could look forward to designing an entire series of warships that would meet all their design specifications in one ship without having to worry about any kind of restrictions. For aircraft carriers, this meant being able to have the large air groups that U.S. carrier doctrine favored, but still having a ship that had enough displacement to be able to accommodate armor for both the flight deck and the hangar decks. So therefore, the Midway would become a new class of battle carrier that received the designation of CVB that would represent a whole new generation of American fighting carriers. However, there was a lot of debate going on as to where to put the armor and how much armor to use, because having all this armor high up on a flight deck is detrimental to a ship's stability. Fortunately, the Americans had a real-world example that showed up on their doorstep when HMS Illustrious, a pre-war armored deck carrier the British had designed, had received severe damage in the Mediterranean from German Stukas. She tied up at Norfolk Naval Yard in 1941 for repairs, and U.S. naval architects were then able to evaluate in a real-world example of how an armored deck was able to handle modern naval ordnance. And so therefore, the British experience in the Mediterranean in World War II was able to help the U.S. design a new carrier, and this had a hand in the final design of the Midway. Midway was laid down in 1943 as an entirely new class of carrier, but despite all the distractions and the other priorities in building established designs, Midway's construction proceeded apace at Norfolk during the rest of the Second World War. However, she missed World War II by just a month by being commissioned in September 1945. However, when she did enter the fleet, she marked a dramatic transition in the design of aircraft carriers. She had an armored flight deck that featured a 3.5-inch series of armor plating through most of the flight deck, as well as 2-inch reinforced steel for both the hangar deck and second deck. She also had extensive compartmentalization, particularly below the second deck, and in fact represented to this very day the most thoroughly subcompartmentalized ship ever built. She was also too large to fit through the Panama Canal, which represented a major departure from American strategic planning. Although Midway missed World War II and had no role in the attack on Japan, she did play a major role in what happened with the development of atomic weaponry delivery and eventually the Cold War that emerged shortly afterwards. Part of the problem the Navy was facing after 1945 was that the Air Force was trying to dominate all military aviation. That was because the Air Force at the time was the only service that was able to deliver bulky atomic weaponry, and the early Truman administration placed a great deal of faith in the American monopoly on atomic weaponry as an ultimate deterrent to future wars. So in order to stay competitive with the Air Force in trying to get a decent portion of the narrow post-World War II budgets, the Navy was able to take the Midway with her armored non-wooden flight deck and use it to demonstrate that ballistic missiles such as captured German V-2 rockets could in fact be launched by a ship at sea, theoretically tipped with a nuclear warhead. And so the Midway was able to play a role in being able to give the Navy a greater portion of the defense budget as the Cold War was starting to warm up. The Korean War, of course, completely changed everything, and the Midway and her two sisters, Coral Sea and FDR, were kept in the Atlantic just in case Korea turned out to be a feint for the attack on NATO. Eventually, however, the Cold War played out, Korea died down, and the Midway in turn was sent to the Pacific. Practically from the moment she arrived in 1955, the Midway was involved in a series of Cold War incidences in the Western Pacific, starting with the Taishan Island evacuation as one of the episodes of the ongoing drama between Taiwan and the People's Republic of China, and also played a role in Vietnam. She was in the first of the combat deployments in 1965, an aircraft flying from the Midway downed several of the first MiGs of the entire Vietnam conflict. However, there was an anticipation of being able to produce one aircraft that would suit both the Air Force and the Navy. That became the F-111 program, and so Midway was taken a hand again for another extensive reconstruction at Hunters Point Shipyard in San Francisco, and she spent the second half of the 1960s having a complete remold of her flight deck and other systems to be able to accommodate the F-111. As it turns out, As we all know, the F-111 proved to be unsuitable as a naval aircraft and spent the rest of her career as an Air Force platform. And there were significant cost overruns in the redesign of the Midway. And so as it turns out, even though the similar redesign was intended for both the Coral Sea and the FDR, Midway's sisters, those never came to pass. So Midway went through the rest of her career with this greatly enlarged flight deck that was meant for the F-111, but which never arrived. Midway then rejoined the Vietnam conflict at the beginning of the 1970s and of course was on hand for the final evacuation of personnel from Saigon in Operation Frequent Wind in 1975. Because of all the stress of trying to maintain a deployment schedule across the Pacific to support the Vietnam effort and now extensions of cruises into the Indian Ocean, the Midway was designated as a forward deployed ship with her home port shifted from Alameda to Yokosuka, Japan in 1973. And so she spent the last 18 years of her career as a forward deployed carrier in the Western Pacific. In this capacity, she was always the cop on the beat, always on deployment the minute she cleared the outer marker buoy, and became a common sight both in Far Eastern waters and in the Indian Ocean. Eventually, she also saw action towards the end of her career after the end of the Cold War with Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm in 1991 in driving the Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. Shortly afterwards, she participated in another evacuation thanks to the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1992 and successfully evacuated Air Force dependents from the devastated Clark Air Force Base. Because of the rapid ending of the Cold War, the Navy decided it didn't need the Midway as a frontline carrier any longer, and so she was designated for an early retirement in 1992, and the decommissioning finally occurred in San Diego in April of 1992. She was then taken to Bremerton for storage, intending to go to the breakers yards when an organization in San Diego was able to retain her for use as a museum, which eventually opened in 2004. Thank you for visiting, and I hope you can see us at our website of midway.org. Taking a closer look at the Midway, you could see that she really is a naval heavyweight. She has an armored flight deck that runs the entire length of topsides, as well as extensive reinforcing of both her hangar and second deck. She has extensive compartmentalization inside the hull, as well as armor plating on both sides. She also sported an extensive gun armament featuring 18 5-inch 54 mounts, as well as an extensive array of anti-aircraft armaments. Her main battery, however, is an unprecedented 120 combat aircraft. This makes the Midway a true battle carrier. I'm Carl Zingheim. Thank you for visiting us here at San Diego, and please be sure to visit us at midway.org.
Destroyers are often called the expendables of a fleet, but only the USA managed to construct destroyers so quickly and in such large numbers that they could easily replenish any losses. Taking into account the military experience gained, each new series of destroyers were designed with improvements that enhanced their combat efficiency. It's no coincidence that the Fletcher, Sumner, and Gearing-class ships continue to serve in navies all over the world decades after World War II had ended.
24 Benson-class destroyers were laid down between 1938 to 1940, and these ships were the last US ships of the type to be built, taking into consideration the treaty limitations for displacement. They were designed on the basis of the previous Sims-class series, and they carried powerful artillery and torpedo armament. However, due to that, they turned out to be overloaded. During the war, some guns and torpedo launchers had to be removed from the Benson-class ships so their AA defenses could be installed. The cruising range of the Benson-class destroyers was sufficient to operate in the Atlantic Ocean, but the US Navy required different destroyers to serve in the Pacific Ocean. This need led to the creation of the Fletcher-class ships, one of the best US destroyers of World War II. The ship included significant displacement reserves already at a stage of her design that allowed her AA defenses to be reinforced as a result. The Fletcher-class destroyers carried strong armament, comprising 5 dual-purpose 127mm guns, and 2 quintuple-tube torpedo launchers could achieve high speeds and had a long cruising range. The need to enhance ships' anti-aircraft armament, which became apparent to the crews of the Fletcher-class ships during combat, led to creation of the Allen M. Sumner-class destroyers. The American designers took the reliability and simplicity of the previous ship's design as a starting point and built a new destroyer that was slightly larger and, respectively, had better sea-keeping characteristics. The ship was equipped with 3 twin turrets housing 127mm dual-purpose Mark 12 guns. These significantly enhanced her anti-aircraft armament, which comprised 12 Bofors guns in coupled and quadruple mounts, plus 11 single-barreled Oerlikon guns. The Gearing-class destroyers were the last destroyers that were designed and built for the US Navy during World War II. In comparison with the previous class, the ship's hull was made longer by 4.3 meters. This increased her onboard fuel reserves by 50%, and as a result, her cruising range as well. The Gearing-class destroyers began entering service in the US Navy in 1944.
Hi, my name is Steve Empress. People on Twitch know me as Retired 8404. I am retired Navy hospital corpsman. I did 20 years in the Navy, started in 1992 and retired in 2012. Joined at the young age of 18 years old. I left my hometown in California to see the world and see what's out there. Throughout my career, I've been to various places, Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, Korea, Guam, Spain, Italy, various places via deployments. And been, had the opportunity to serve aboard submarines, surface ships, with the Marines, with the Seabees. I've been on shore commands, hospitals and clinics. I've been in as many places around the Navy as I possibly could to kind of get a full feel for the Navy to the best of my ability. And I'll tell you what, it was the most amazing adventure in my life, starting at 18 years old for the last 20 years. I learned, respect. I learned responsibility. All of these things, they come to you either quickly, you learn, or you kind of get in trouble, and sometimes it happens. But nevertheless, I wouldn't change anything that happened in the past, and it is the most wonderful opportunity for a young person to do if they have no idea where they want to go in college or whatnot. So, again, the Navy was fan-freaking-tabulous. I loved it. Let's talk about World of Warships. World of Warships, I've come by this game because I saw that it had Navy ships and hoped it had submarines, and at the time it didn't, but they're working on that. And I love the attention to detail that they had on these ships. The game was in such a pace that I could stream it very well because I can enjoy the ships, I can enjoy the gameplay, and I can still talk to the community. And the community in World of Warships is absolutely amazing. There has been such a welcoming amount of in the community, and it's filled with a lot of veterans. You'd be surprised. A lot of veterans play video games, and just the game itself was great. You can either do it versus the computer, the AI, and you can do whatever pace you want, or you can be kind of a little bit more competitive and do some of the PvP aspects of it. It's all how you do it. This is my go-to game because it is absolutely, for me, I just like to do it and just blow things up, and I have fun with it. I love the varieties of destroyers, cruisers, and battleships. Not a big fan of carriers, but I'm working on it. And hopefully one day they'll have submarines and I can master that. And my message for veterans is this. In the video game community, especially World of Warships, World of Tanks, and World of Planes, I believe that there is a large veteran community there that would accept you with open arms. So just branch out. And if you see any veterans that are streaming or playing the game, hook up. Trust me, we look out for one another, and there are things that we just get. We get it. And if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. If you don't, sorry civilians, I apologize. But there's a phrase that we understand. It's we get it. And I hope to see more military veterans out there, of all countries, for that matter, of all countries. And thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Jason Hill, a Verizon employee and Army veteran. In our final segment on veteran gamers and mental health, we're talking to Matthew Twigg, one of the leaders of Wounded Warrior Project's gaming initiative.
Thanks for having me, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing great, man. It's a great day.
So I think a lot of people know about the Wounded Warrior Project, but let's talk a little bit about Wounded Warrior Play.
Yeah, for sure. So our WWP Play Stream to Serve really is a connection piece to the live streaming world. Kind of started as, that connection to, very passionate individuals that were hosting these charity streams, on different platforms like Twitch, like Facebook, like YouTube. And it's really kind of morphed into a larger community, supporting Wounded Warrior Project and supporting gaming.
It's such a great thing you guys are doing, Matt. And, where did the idea start? Where did it come from?
That's a great question. A group of very intelligent teammates started to see all these really passionate charity streamers hosting streams for Wounded Warrior Project. And what they wanted to do was really just kind of grow a program organically and really kind of a grassroots effort. I understand you're a gamer yourself, correct?
I am.
Yeah. How do you use gaming on a daily basis?
Make the world melt away.
That's right, man. That's right. So, gaming offers that to everybody, and it's great for the mental health as well.
A private walking onto this virtual base for the first time. Where do I go to get signed up, and how do I get involved there?
Search for Discord. You can download that Discord app. We can get you connected to the Wounded Warrior Project, server. And then from there, it's really just off and running. You'll get to see all the posts that we make about the events that we're doing in Discord, about the community nights. We've just done a whole slew of things on the Discord server to really keep veterans connected.
Hey, Matt, I've heard you mention this Discord server a few times. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, of course. So Discord is just it's a program that really centralizes our community. It's a great kind of like a mix between a chat program and a bulletin board where you can make posts and kind of come back and revisit things. It offers voice, text, and video. So it really just gives us a central place for our community to kind of stay connected and for us to connect with our communities.
It's awesome. So in addition to the platform we're discussing now, what sort of mental health resources does WWP provide for veterans?
So we have quite a few mental health programs at Wounded Warrior Project. It's our Wounded Warrior Project Talk program. It's really a great program where warriors can have 20 to 30-minute conversations weekly with a WWP teammate, another veteran, or maybe a family support member. We also have our Warrior Care Network program. They do a wide variety of inpatient and outpatient mental health services for our wounded warriors.
Speaking of that, what kind of feedback have you been getting from the veteran community?
Really, this started right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's just exploded since then. We have over 1,500 members in our Discord server, and it's really just given our veterans a way to stay connected during the pandemic. But it's more than that. It's more than just playing games. They're creating friendships. They're creating these lasting connections. We're really happy with where it is, and we're really excited to see where it is in the future.
Tell me a little more about the virtual relay that WWP is launching today.
Yeah, of course. So it is our first ever live streaming charity relay called Warrior Week. Warrior Week is a 7-day live streaming relay taking place on November 9th through 15th. And so it's just our kind of chance to connect with the community, play with the community. We're going to give some mission spotlights, which are really going to kind of give us some inside looks to our programs and services. So we got a lot of great things planned. We also have a lot of passionate community members, streamers, and influencers that are going to help us raise awareness and raise critical funds for Wounded Warrior Project. So we hope you'll join us maybe for that.
You know I'm going to be there, Matt. And thanks again for your time today.
Of course.
Anyone can participate in WWP Play Stream to Serve program to help provide free mental health sessions for veterans. To download a starter kit with details on how to contribute your stream to the cause, please visit woundedwarriorproject.org/give-back. That's all for Healthy Competition today. But before we wrap up, Verizon wants to remind all the vets out there that our mission is to give more to you who have already given so much to our country. One of the ways we do that is with a military discount. If you're a current customer or thinking of switching and you haven't taken advantage of our special deal for service members, please check out the link below to learn more. Enjoy the rest of Fleet Week and good luck on the virtual high seas.
You told me a really, really funny story about how you got on KID. Can you tell that to our viewers?
Yes, I can. I got on the KID maybe one Tuesday night, about 10 minutes to 12. Last minute, they told me, first they asked me that I want to ship over, and I said, well, no, I'm going to get out, when I do my time. They said, well, you need some sea duty. And they said, we'll find a ship to put you on. This was in the morning about 10 o'clock. So I thought it was going to take 3 or 4 weeks or longer. So I was all relaxed, but they called me up that day about 3 o'clock and said, hey, Leroy, we got a ship for you, the USS Kidd. It's docked out in San Diego Harbor. So you'll be on that thing tonight. We'll get your gear together, be on there tonight before midnight. So I got on there about 10 minutes to 12 last minute. And when I got aboard the ship, I was shocked because where I was, Brownfield, at show duty, you had to have starch and iron shoes shine. You had to be pretty well squared away. I got on there, most guys' beards, wrinkled jeans on and things like that. They look like pirates, most of them.
That's fantastic.
So I thought, and they had big knives on their side too. And I thought to myself, hey man, I don't have a knife. I can't get on that ship.
Wow.
But anyway, I get on the ship, and the next morning I just get up. I finally up the bunk down there that don't have a mattress on it. If it ain't got a mattress on it, then it's nobody bunk. Sure. So I went down below and found a bunk, middle of the bunk. And so I hopped in that thing. I never slept enough with nothing like that before. But after I was on there, the very next morning they come out in muster. So I goes out there and stand in line with a bunch of guys. I didn't know who these guys was. I just joined a line of guys. And the guy who was calling the roll off, well, he never noticed that. He never called my name, and I never said anything. I learned one thing in the military: don't volunteer nothing. They don't say nothing, you don't say nothing.
Wow.
So when I answered the roll call, the next thing I know, hey, everybody started scattering. So I just scattered, just got lost in the crowd. So that went on for about 3 weeks or so.
Wow.
And finally, I was down below one time. They were having a drill. And so some mean-looking chief come down there, hey, what are you doing now? Where your battle station at? I don't have one. You don't have one? How long you been on this ship? I said, for 3 weeks. So he tells me, well, we got to find somebody to do it. So he goes and takes me to meet some first class, I guess. Hey, this guy don't have a battle station. Yeah, he got nothing to do. When he get over here in 3 weeks, what are you trained for? Nothing. So I didn't know anything. If you don't train in port, before you go out to sea, once you go out to sea, you ain't gonna touch nothing on there.
Okay.
So I basically, he said, well, I say, be security. I had a pretty good, I think I had a pretty good marksman when I was in basic training. So anyway, they said, hey, you're pretty good. I see you do pretty good marksman. So they say, you be security. You walk the deck of this ship, you can 4 hours. So that's what I did. Once we go out to sea, you don't need anybody to watch the deck because you're out at sea.
Sure.
Then I did bridge watches.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you spent your first 3 weeks on USS Kidd just hiding, basically. Kind of like, cool, I'm here, I work here, and then going away. And then afterwards they said, we have no idea what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, right.
Here's a rifle, your security.
Yes, yeah.
That's really impressive.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I was also told before we got down here, and there's a reason we're standing where we're at. That's you in this picture, right?
Yeah, that young guy. Please say that.
Sure. This young man is in front of what it looks like an Essex-class aircraft carrier. What were you doing?
Well, we was getting ready to refuel, taking on ammunition and food.
Okay.
Yeah, we did our wall mark shop out at sea. We pulled side of a big ship, carried a small ship like the Kidd had nothing to give us because we run out of food. That's one thing on one of the small ships like here. We had 280 men on there.
Sure.
Yeah, 15 officers and 12 chiefs. So you had to take on a lot of food. Most of those guys was chow hounds. So we would put along there and we would high line. They would throw a monkey fist over, and we would bring big old bucks of food. We would bring over there and then take on our food and take ammunition.
Wow. And so seeing as you have a very interesting story on USS Kidd, what would you say the most fascinating part of that ship, in terms of just being a destroyer, a Fletcher-class destroyer in the U.S. Navy?
Well, that thing, that's a good ship to be on. That thing would really throw out some fire. If you see one of those drills on there, we should shoot at sleeves all the time. They would shoot at sleeves all the time, and basically they would tear them sleeves up. That thing was pretty accurate. Yeah, those 5 millimeter guns. That thing would kick out so much lead it look like a bridge. You can walk on it.
The Kidd is a Fletcher-class destroyer that served in World War II from 1943 to 1946. She served again during the Korean War, starting in 1951, and ended her service in 1964 during the Cold War.
Based on their powerful armament, unique survivability, sophisticated fire control systems, long operational range, and decent seakeeping, Fletchers are rightfully considered one of the best ships of this type. Of course, along with many other classes of ships, they also had their fair share of casualties during the war. There were 25 Fletcher-class destroyers that were sunk during World War II. Japanese kamikaze tactics became their major headache. The ships were quite an easy target, patrolling far away from major forces. And it was April 1945 that our Pacific pirate first encountered kamikaze pilots. Kidd was patrolling in a group of 4 destroyers when a couple of aircraft were spotted in the skies, seemingly having a dogfight with one another. Perplexed to have detected an Allied plane, the ships ceased fire and kept observing. Only when the couple started to descend, the crews realized that it was a trap set by a kamikaze. One of the planes was shot down, but the other one hit the USS Kidd's deck. Almost a third of the crew was incapacitated, 38 killed, 45 wounded. The chief mechanic was boiled alive in the ship's boiler rooms. The ship's doctor was caught by a bomb fragment and lost his eye, making him unable to fulfill his duty. He was carrying a camera that he used to shoot the battle. After the explosion, its film was mostly burned, except for the fragment displaying the kamikaze plane directly before the impact. Despite all these casualties, the Kidd managed to move away for repairs under her own steam. This surely outlines the outstanding construction of Fletchers and the high skill of the crews aboard. However, this was the end of World War II for the USS Kidd. Later, she would participate in the Korean War, supporting ground force with her cannons. During her service years, the USS Kidd was awarded with 12 battle stars, 8 during World War II, and the rest in the Korean events. The ship also participated in numerous landing operations across the Pacific Ocean islands, repelled aerial attacks of the Japanese, and even scored a film role in Run Silent, Run Deep, a movie dedicated to U.S. submarines. In 1964, after 20 years of service, the destroyer, now inferior in certain parameters, was finally decommissioned. Nevertheless, a lucky fate saved the pirate ship from the dock cutters, as it was decided to leave her among 3 Fletchers set to be renovated and turned into floating museums.
She's been brought here to Baton Rouge as a memorial for the state's veterans and for destroyer and Navy veterans all around the country, and is rated one of the most accurate historical ships in the historic fleet, which spans about 5 continents.
The name USS Kidd now belongs to the new Arleigh Burke class of ship. This old pirate may now sleep well. Her flag is in reliable hands.
Greetings from Annapolis. I'm Vice Admiral Retired Pete Daly, CEO and publisher of the U.S. Naval Institute. Thank you for joining us for this special 75th anniversary Fleet Week event commemorating the end of World War II. I would like to thank Wargaming and World of Warships for putting on this event and for including the Naval Institute. First, a little bit about who we are. Founded in 1873, the Naval Institute is the independent forum for the sea services. We are a nonprofit membership organization. We publish 2 prestigious magazines. Proceedings Magazine is the heart of our open forum, and we publish our award-winning bi-monthly Naval History magazine. Our daily news service, USNI News, is growing every day. The Naval Institute Press and its imprint, Dead Reckoning, strive to produce the highest quality books and graphic novels focusing on naval and military history. Our publishing efforts draw from our extensive photo archive. Also, the Naval Institute's expanding with the construction of the Jack C. Taylor Center. Opening in early 2021, we hope to host a World of Warships event of our own in the future right here on the grounds of the U.S. Naval Academy. For more information on the Naval Institute Press, and how to become a member, please see usni.org for details. In October 2019, the Naval Institute officially went full ahead with World of Warships. We wanted to partner with Wargaming and World of Warships because we could see through their in-game models, the Naval Legends series, and their commitment to museum ships that this was a group devoted to history who deserved our attention and resources. Through this partnership, we strive to provide historical context to the ships and events you see in the game. And I trust most of you have seen the articles and photo collections that have been published on the World of Warships site. Keep an eye on the website and the portal in the future as we continue to deliver great historical content. Furthermore, the Naval Institute Press is happy to announce that due to your support, the Friedman Illustrated U.S. Warships series has been reprinted. U.S. Cruisers now features one of my favorite ships on the cover, USS Worcester CL-144. You should all know her well. So thank you to this community of wargamers and history enthusiasts alike. It's because of you and that the interest in naval history is alive and well. We hope to continue to evolve our offerings to meet the needs of this audience even more and help preserve history both for current and future generations. This is the common mission we share with Wargaming and World of Warships. And from all of us here at the Naval Institute on the grounds of the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, thank you for joining us here today.
Well, when I finally saw the Intrepid, I was just so overwhelmed, standing on the dock and looking up at this big, mighty ship. My buddy Smitty and I, we climbed aboard. We got lost for the first day. Never knew which way was fore or aft after you got down below decks. And just fell in love with this ship. Love on first sight.
I was used to listen to it, and you'd have earphones with two phones with two different jacks, so you could hear two different things at once. So I'd listen to what I was supposed to on one earphone and put Tokyo Rose or somebody on the other where you get music. And when a communication officer came running into the bridge one day and took the earphones off my head and put them on his, and like he wanted to hear something that was coming important. So I stood there and he goes, "What the is this?" I says, "It's radio, it's music, sir." He says, "Well, you're not supposed to listen to music. I'm going to put you on report." And the captain's cabin was right beside it. He heard the noise going. I said, "What's going on?" And he says, "I'm going to put this man on report. He was listening to music." I said, and the captain said, "Oh, he was?" He says, "Yeah." And he says, "What else was he doing?" He says, "Well, he's on the TBS." And he says, "Well, was he taking the messages?" He says, "Yeah, he had a phone for them." He says, "Well, he was doing his duty, wasn't he?" He says, "Yeah." "And he likes music?" "That's great." He said, "Well, I think he should go on report." The captain says, "If anybody's going to go on report, it's you for making so much noise on the bridge." So, and that was Captain Sprague, who was the greatest guy in the world. So, and I got out of that okay.
On our way to training in the Caribbean when we left the yard, and training in preparation for our deployment, we obtained a full-size female dummy from one of the drug companies to practice, have everybody practice CPR on. Not only the corpsmen, but the repair parties and others on the ship. And one day I went up to the commanding officer. I said, "You know, we have a woman on board." And I think he looked at first rather shocked and serious. And then I explained to him the situation and what it was. And I said, I don't remember who suggested it, but with his approval, the captain's approval, we took the dummy up to the captain's chair on the starboard side of the bridge, where he would sit when we were having a replenishment with an oiler. And we put her in the chair, propped her up so that the dummy would be very visible from the ship alongside us. And they have a radio communication between us and the ship alongside. And we had somebody try to imitate a female voice and said, "Hi, how you all doing over there?" And I still remember the reaction of the crewmen on the oiler. They all rushed to the side facing us and pointed and laughed and cheered. And our pseudo-female person said, my name is Mary, and I'm having such a great time with all my shipmates on Intrepid." And it got a big laugh from everybody on our bridge as well as on the ship alongside.
25th of November, and that was the day that we were hit by 2 kamikazes. And again, old Taylor and Charlie here, I'm sitting on the deck when we get under attack. In fact, they started maneuvering. And I told my gunner, point that gun up. And I don't know, it was probably in a lock, so it wouldn't fire on the ground anyway. But we didn't appreciate that, but there's nothing we could do. We sit there, and I guess I'm not sure whether there was another airplane or not, but I know that I was there. And then they finally got into the wind, and we took off. So we were still inside of the ship when the kamikaze hit, the first one. So we went on to an area where they said there were 3 mine layers. When we got there was only 2. So we made our run on the 1 mine layer, and again we'd peel off as we circled it. And when my turn came, I would be coming in to shift this way and fore and aft, thwart ships. So instead of going down, I stayed up there so that I can make a run fore and aft on that ship. And again, that's not one of the things we're supposed to do, but I did it. And I felt I was on. So I went a little bit lower, and we had lost our first airplane over Palau where he went too low and the bomb blew him up. So we were aware of that, but nevertheless, I still went down a little lower. And as I pulled out, my gunner yelled, "We got him." And I turned and I could see as I have in that picture, the bow going down, stern going down, and the middle in flame. And what I could see was the flame about 1,500 feet in the air as I went down. So that's what I got my DFC for.
Hi, my name is Eric Bain, Curator of Aviation at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum, and today we are visiting our friends at the New England Air Museum in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, to take a look at one of the iconic aircraft of World War II, the Vought F-4U Corsair. The Corsair was a carrier-based fighter and ground support aircraft for the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. The Corsair combined the most powerful engine of the day with some of the truly unique design features. The first prototype was flown on May 29, 1940. Corsairs flew from the Intrepid during World War II as both a fighter and a fighter bomber. Possibly the most distinctive feature of the Corsair was its inverted gull wing design. The wing was mounted low on the fuselage, and this contributed to the performance of the design in different ways. First of all, essential for storage aboard the ship, the wings had to fold. Also, the struts had to offer ground clearance for the large propeller that is mounted on that 2,000 horsepower radial engine up front. Most importantly, the struts also needed to be strong to withstand the sudden impact of arrested carrier landings. To accommodate a folding wing, the main landing gear ideally had to retract to the rear with the wheels rotating approximately 90 degrees and flat relative to the wing. The solution to all these problems was the inverted gull wing. This angled down or anhedral wing center section permitted the wing and fuselage to meet at the optimum angle for minimizing airframe drag. Placing the gear struts here at the lower apex of the wing geometry permitted a shorter length, allowing the struts to fit up inside the wing when retracted. These stout, short struts were well suited for the hard carrier deck landings while still providing clearance for that massive 13-foot diameter prop. Corsairs had this very long nose to facilitate a large, self-sealing fuel tank in front of the cockpit. This initially made carrier operations difficult because it inhibits the pilot's view over the nose when landing. Thanks to the British Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm, an improved landing technique was developed, and the Corsair proved to be an excellent carrier-borne weapon. On 16 April 1945, Corsair pilots of VF-10, flying from the Intrepid, repelled a large group of Japanese kamikaze airplanes that were about to attack the fleet. Ensign Alfred Lurch got 7 of them. Lieutenant Phil Kirkwood bagged 6, and 2 other pilots from the unit claimed 4 each. By the end of the day, the squadron confirmed 29 of the attackers shot down. Corsairs were very capable and saw service not only in the Pacific during World War II, but also during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. Corsairs continued to serve in the reserves as well as in foreign air forces, some into the 1970s. The last time the Corsair was used in actual combat was in 1969 during the so-called Football War between Honduras and El Salvador. It's interesting to note that both nations flew variants of the Corsair. We would like to thank the staff at the New England Air Museum for sharing their incredible collection with us, especially this magnificent example of the F4U Corsair. For more information about the New England Air Museum, visit neam.org, and for more behind-the-scenes videos, visit intrepidmuseum.org. Eric Boehm here, Curator of Aviation at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum. Today we are visiting friends at the New England Air Museum in Windsor Locks, Connecticut to take a look at one of the more important aircraft types of World War II, the Grumman F-6F Hellcat. In the early stages of World War II in the Pacific Theater, the frontline U.S. fighter was the Grumman F-4F Wildcat. In capable hands, it fared well against the Japanese Zero fighter. But if the tide of the war was going to change, the U.S. needed something better. Grumman designers studied the performance of the Zero and the tactics of the Japanese aviators. They also listened to the pilots who flew the Wildcat and their recommendations for improvements. The Hellcat was the result. It was faster than the Zero, but the Japanese fighter could outturn it at slower speeds. The big difference was the durability of the Hellcat. It had armor plating to protect the pilot and critical systems, and it also had self-sealing fuel tanks. The Zero lacked all these protective features, and Hellcat pilots, using tactics that capitalized on their advantages, bested the Japanese fighters more often than not. The Hellcat design was pretty straightforward. It relied on a powerful Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine for its superior speed and altitude performance. It had the now classic Grumman folding wing design, where the wings pivoted, folding against the fuselage, making it compact for below-deck storage. Hellcats could carry an external fuel tank under the centerline, extending their range, and there were hardpoints on the inner wings for almost 2,000 pounds of bombs and rockets. Night fighter versions had a radar carried in a pod on the wing. These proved highly successful against Japanese raiders hoping to hide in the darkness. There was even a reconnaissance version that was fitted with cameras. Both the night fighter and photo recon versions served on Intrepid alongside the conventional Hellcats. A total of 305 Navy aviators became aces flying the Hellcat. Aces are pilots that score 5 or more air-to-air victories. Intrepid had its share of Hellcat aces. Alexander Vrashew became an ace while briefly serving with VF-6 on Intrepid in early 1944. Cecil Harris scored 23 of his total wartime count of 24 victories while serving with VF-18 aboard Intrepid later in 1944. Another VF-18 pilot, Charles Mallory, led 5 other Hellcats in an attack against 24 Japanese airplanes. He shot 5 of them down himself that day. About 22 Hellcats still exist today, and that's from a production run of 12,275. The Intrepid Museum hopes to add a Hellcat to our collection someday. We'd like to thank the staff at the New England Air Museum for sharing their incredible collection with us once again, and especially this rare example of the F-6F Hellcat. For more information about the New England Air Museum, visit neam.org, and for more behind-the-scenes videos, visit intrepidmuseum.org.
Greetings all, Nicholas Morin, also known as Chieftain. Yes, I do work for Wargaming. I'm sure you've seen me on a couple of the videos from time to time. I am also in year 23 so far of wearing Army Green, 3 with the Irish and 20 with the Americans. But I didn't actually always start off looking at the Army. Believe it or not, initially I was considering the Navy, because I was always into naval war games, played a lot of Harpoon, for example. And well, what turned me green though was I was thinking to myself, what would a new recruit or newly graduated seaman Morin be doing in the Irish Navy? And I had visions of myself standing a watch on the front end of an Irish patrol vessel in the North Atlantic in January, being quite cold, wet and miserable. And I decided that if it was going to be cold, wet and miserable, better not to be cold, wet, miserable, and then have to worry about swimming to shore if things go wrong. So I decided to go be cold, wet, miserable on the land instead. Which actually, had I thought about it one stage further, when you're done on the ship, you go inside where there's a heater and maybe a warm shower and a proper bed, whereas in the army you get into your cold, wet sleeping bag where you continue to be cold, wet, and miserable until it's time to wake up. Which of course you can't do because you never fell asleep in the first place because you were too cold, wet, and miserable. Oh well, the things you learn. Still, I can't say I have any particular regrets. I mean, I went to Iraq for a year in my tank as a tank platoon leader. I commanded a cav troop of Bradleys. I did a year in Afghanistan driving a desk. As I say, I'm still in Texas Guard. And, well, it's been an interesting experience. Now, why do I play World of Warships? Well, because it's kind of pleasing, I guess. I mean, it's very pretty. If I've had a bad day, I just load up warships and cruise along looking at some very highly detailed ships that I know generally existed in most cases, and if not, they're very interesting hypotheticals. And then in this high fidelity beauty, blow up other people in very beautifully modeled ships in glorious explosions. I find it all very therapeutic. So what would I say to other veterans? Well, thanks for keeping me company. I mean, we've had some interesting times. You run into all sorts of people in the Army. I'm sure you run into them in the civilian environment as well, but you're kind of confined when you do have them in the Army. But some of this in common that both the Irish and the Americans have done is that we've all raised our right hand and volunteered to do something incredibly silly. And, well, I don't know if I'd do it again. I certainly don't regret it. But as I say, we've had some good times, and I will see you. Yeah. 3, 2. So what would I say to other veterans? I don't know, I've been sitting on this platform. Thanks for keeping me company. We've had some interesting times. I mean, you meet all sorts of people in the military, but something that we all have in common is that we're all stupid enough to raise our right hand and say, I do solemnly declare, or swear, depending on your own leanings, to do something really, really silly. And that's not going to work either. Let's try it. Third time lucky. So what would I tell other veterans in the wargaming community? Well, it's been interesting. Thanks for keeping me company through all these years. I mean, you meet all sorts, but something we all have in common, at least in Ireland and America, is that we all raised our right hand and did solemnly declare or swear, depending on which way you lean, to do something really, really silly. But hey, I guess it worked out. So, I mean, for a lot of laughs, a lot of frustration, times you want to strangle somebody. I'm sure anybody else who's been in the military is aware of the complete range of emotions and interactions that you have. All I can say is just keep on trucking as they were, and or in my case, keep on tanking. So, I will see you either on the World of Tanks battlefield or on the World of Warships high seas. Note, I used the word on because I have this thing about submarines. I'm really not quite sure what, but no matter. Just a little thing in the back of my mind. Anyway, take care.
Great Britain's navy was always the foundation of their empire's prosperity and might. The country repeatedly confirmed its title, Mistress of the Seas, both in their brilliant victories and leading role in the world's shipbuilding advancement. Without any exaggeration, we can admit that the Royal Navy has long served as an example of combat organization, naval strategy implementation, and equipment. Many nations have borrowed British achievements as the basis for creating their own navies.
Two Grom-class destroyers, which were designed and built in Great Britain for the Polish Navy, were among the most powerful destroyers in Europe, and even in the world in terms of their anti-aircraft armament at the time they entered service in 1937. They could gain high speeds of up to 39.5 knots and had powerful artillery. The destroyers were inferior only to the latest leading French ships of that time, which were an intermediate ship type between cruisers and destroyers. The Tribal-class destroyers, one of which was Cossack, were designed by the British in response to large foreign Navy destroyers with more than 1,500 tons of displacement that had noticeably surpassed standard English destroyers in terms of their armament. The Tribal-class destroyers, with their standard displacement of 1,960 tons, had a yacht stem instead of a usual straight stem and more powerful propulsion. The destroyers stood out among all British destroyers by their usage of coupled 120mm mounts that allowed their number of barrels and firepower to be doubled respectively.
If the Royal Navy was the basis of the British Empire's prosperity, then cruisers formed the core of that navy. These protectors of British naval trade communications served along the vitally important routes and demonstrated the Crown's might across almost all the world's seas and oceans. Due to the tasks they performed, British cruisers conventionally stood out by their good seakeeping characteristics, strong armament, long cruising ranges, and high levels of sea endurance. International interwar treaties led to the emergence of new generation light cruisers in the Royal Navy. These cruisers were developed after World War II broke out.
The appearance of the Fiji-class cruisers was indebted to the cruiser displacement limit of 8,000 tons, specified by the London Treaty, as well as the Megami-class cruisers built by the Japanese. The Fiji-class cruisers represented by design a greatly reworked version of the previous Southampton-class cruisers. Thanks to the more dense allocation of the ship's elements, the naval engineers managed to shorten the ship's hull more than by 10 meters, while a decrease in propulsion power and thinner armor allowed them to preserve the same level of armament that the previous ship class had. The Edinburgh-class light cruisers represented an attempt of British naval engineers to create ships that would be on par with US Brooklyn and Japanese Megami. Edinburgh and Belfast were related to the third Town-class cruisers, and their main battery guns were the same, but they had thicker armor, the parameters of which were among the best in the world for light cruisers. They also had enhanced AA defenses.
During the interwar years, Great Britain strove to lead the naval arms race at all costs. The London Treaty of 1936 set a limitation of 35,000 tons on battleship displacement and 356mm for gun caliber. However, when Japan cancelled their participation in the international naval treaties, it led to all the naval superpowers starting to design battleships armed with artillery of calibers between 380 and 406mm. By the end of the 1930s, only the British had remained loyal to the treaty limitations. In 1936, after almost an 11-year break, the British Parliament approved construction of a battleship from a new project with a displacement of around 35,000 tons and 356mm main battery guns.
Battlecruiser Hood was the pride and beauty of the British Navy. When the ship entered service in 1920, she was the most advanced warship in the world. She had powerful armament, thick armor, and was capable of high speeds. Overall, the ship's characteristics embodied a ship type that would be called a fast battleship at the end of the 1930s. The King George V class battleships were the first British battleships to be designed after the battleship break in the middle of the 1930s. In terms of some of their characteristics, they were slightly inferior to the new battleships of other countries. For example, the speed of King George V was 28 knots versus a speed of 30 knots that the new French and US ships were capable of. Nevertheless, the 5 built ships of that class stood out by their thick armor and powerful artillery. They represented the main firepower of the British Navy during World War II.
Opinions regarding deck aviation were controversial in Britain in the interwar period. The controversy was caused by the fact that aviation was seen as part of the Air Force, not the Navy. However, Britain became the first country to build specialized aircraft carriers and reconstruct battle cruisers into carriers. In 1935, the English laid down the advanced Ark Royal, which greatly influenced the further evolution of carrier architecture. In 1937, they managed to lay down 4 illustrious-class aircraft carriers. By the time World War II broke out, Great Britain had 7 aircraft carriers in the Navy and 6 more were under construction.
The emergence of the illustrious class carriers marked the beginning of a new stage of evolution for carriers. They became the first world's carriers with a fully armoured flight deck, and that set an example for all further British heavy aircraft carriers. The hangars were also protected with armour, but the enhanced armour led to a reduction in the number of squadrons, half of that of Ark Royal. At the time when Indomitable entered service in 1941, she carried 48 aircraft on board. The Implacable class carriers are considered to be the 3rd series of the previous illustrious class. That's how clear their succession is. However, the new class was different from the preceding class in terms of the increased hull dimensions and a 2-level hangar. Thanks to that, Implacable could carry up to 73 aircraft. In order to keep displacement under 23,000 tons and her speed around 32 knots, the armour of the hangar deck traverses and magazines were made thinner.
The development of the French shipbuilding industry was affected by 3 main factors in the interwar period. First, the German Navy was shackled by the Treaty of Versailles, and it didn't pose any serious threat. Second, France mainly needed cruisers and destroyers to oppose a new potential enemy in the Mediterranean, Italy, which was the primary influence on French design at that time. The third factor was money. When distributing their military budget, the government favored the development of land forces and didn't pay much attention to the needs of their navy. Nevertheless, in the beginning of the 1930s, the entire world was already talking about the new French ships. The French solemnly observed the limitations of international treaties and created some truly outstanding ships that featured a multitude of cutting-edge design solutions. The development of French naval light forces in the 1930s was marked by the emergence of a unique ship type that was classified by the French as a large destroyer, contre-torpilleur. They were close to the leaders or small cruisers of the World War I era. These ships were built to perform reconnaissance tasks, fight against enemy light forces, and attack battleships with torpedoes.
Le Fantasque is justly considered to be the pinnacle of the French large destroyer type. The project combined speed and firepower with reasonable displacement. The main difference in contrast to the previous series was a new 138mm gun, the effective rate of fire of which could reach 12 shots per minute. As a result, the weight of the Le Fantasque class destroyer salvo was twice as heavy as that of a standard British destroyer of that time. Le Terrible achieved a maximum speed of 45 knots during tests. This speed record for destroyers hasn't been beaten since. The 2 Mogador-class large destroyers were the logical conclusion of that type's evolution in the French Navy as they shifted even closer to light cruisers. The specific feature of the project was the placement of their main battery guns in twin turrets. Compared to the Le Fantasque-class ships, the number of guns increased almost by 2/3, while their displacement increased by just 20%. Thanks to their new propulsion, it took just 5 to 7 minutes for the ships to accelerate from 14 to 35 knots, while the large destroyers of previous series needed around 20 minutes to achieve the same speed.
The development of cruisers in France in the 1930s was also defined by the nation's rivalry with Italy in the Mediterranean. The cruiser fever that had spread among all the world's leading superpowers didn't pass by France. After France had passed the stage of treaty cruisers that didn't always have balanced main combat characteristics, by the second half of the 1930s, the French designers had drawn on their previous experience to create a series of great ships that featured many advanced solutions at that time.
The La Galissonière-class cruisers were primarily developed versions of the previous Émile Bertin ships, with a series of upgrades that were designed to improve their protection. These ships were built to oppose the emerging Italian cruisers, the Raimondo Montecalculi and Okuda Oster classes, which had armor belts. The improved armor theoretically resulted in a reduced speed of 31 knots, but all the cruisers exceeded that and achieved speeds of up to 35.5 knots during trials. In terms of all of their characteristics, the La Galissonière cruisers represented an almost perfect pre-war light cruiser. The project of the last French heavy cruiser was developed to oppose the well-protected Italian Zara-class cruisers. This is why the French designers introduced a series of drastic innovations so that the new ship would be different from her predecessors, both in terms of her appearance and performance characteristics. The most considerable difference was that her armor and torpedo protection were greatly improved. Algerie was considered to be the best ship of her type in Europe and was one of the best Washington Treaty cruisers in the world. She heavily influenced the German Admiral Hipper-class heavy cruisers that were built later, but Algerie still surpassed them in terms of firepower.
In the 1930s, the process of designing and building battleships could be called a fine art to some extent. This is because in order to create an exceptional modern and powerful ship that would set a leading example, with its characteristics both comforting to treaty limitations and satisfying naval needs, brilliant mastery was required. The French shipbuilders coped with that task very successfully and designed one of the best ships at that time under the conditions of significant cost-cutting.
Dunkirk was created to fight against the German pocket battleships of the Deutschland-class, and her displacement was quite moderate for a battleship, even in terms of treaty limitations. To provide sufficient armor thickness to withstand 283mm shells, the designers shortened the length of the armored citadel by placing both turrets with 330mm guns on the bow. Each of the turrets held 4 guns to save space. The placement of the main guns allowed the hull to be shaped in an optimal way, which in turn allowed the ship to reach high speeds of up to 30 knots, despite not having particularly powerful propulsion. While designing Richelieu, the French tried to draw on their experience of building the Dunkirk-class ships to the fullest. That explains the battleship's shared layout, with both quadruple turrets housing 380mm guns placed at the bow. As a result, the ship turned out to be not only the most innovative, but also one of the most successful ships among the so-called treaty battleships that were laid down by the superpowers after a break in the second half of the 1930s. The daring solutions that were used on Richelieu proved to be effective. The ship had boilers of a totally new type that provided greater weight economy, more power, and a speed of 31 knots. While the ship's torpedo protection was the best in the world.
They became the scourge of the Japanese Navy during World War II. Operating in wolf packs and alone, they sank enemy tankers, capital ships, and submarines.
The Batfish during its record-breaking 3 submarines in 76 hours.
Specifications of submarine USS Batfish as of 1943. Length 94 meters. Beam more than 8 meters. Mean draft more than 5 meters. Displacement submerged 2,415 tons. The sub has a double hull. Maximum diameter of the pressure hull, almost 5 meters. Thickness of the pressure hull, more than 22 millimeters. Armament, artillery, Mark 17 gun with a caliber of 127 millimeter. Bofors anti-aircraft autocannon with a caliber of 40 millimeters. Or a Lycon anti-aircraft autocannon with a caliber of 20 millimeters.
During United States submarine diving operations, crew have 30 to 40 seconds to get from watch stations into the boat ready for battle. In that time, crew must take weapons like the 50 caliber and 30 caliber machine guns down this hatch and into the armory. In that time, these crew are trained to get into the hatch in 10 seconds. They jump down, dog down the hatches, and prepare for battle stations.
Torpedo armament, 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, 6 forward, 4 aft. 24 Mark 18 electric torpedoes, caliber 533 millimeters.
This is the after torpedo room. This compartment contains 1/3 of the torpedoes on the submarine. Those torpedoes are fired from these 4 tubes, which is 2 less than the forward torpedo room. Now, loading a torpedo is a fairly simple process. You take the torpedo push bar and you fit these prongs at the end by the propellers. Then you fit a rope through the pulley here, and you link that rope through this hole right here. The men manually pull the torpedo directly into the tube. Once it's clear, they lock the tube and they release air in a tank through these pipes directly into the tube, and it fires the torpedo.
Maximum surface speed about 20 knots. Submerged speed about 9 knots. Cruising range, surfaced 11,000 miles at 10 knots. Submerged 96 miles at 2 knots. Endurance 60 days. The War Memorial Park in the city of Muskogee, Oklahoma, became the last berthing station for the submarine. In May 1973, Batfish was officially named a museum ship. She is open for visitors all year round.
Ahoy Fleet, Goodnight Out 13 here with the World of Warships team. I am the Operations Manager. Well, what does Operations Manager do? Well, I make sure that in-game events and contests run smoothly. I also help design some of these cool in-game events as well and missions. One of my favorite ships to play is the Fletcher. It's a Tier 9. It's got lots of torpedoes and guns, and who doesn't like torpedoes and guns? Another thing that I do with the World of Warships team is I am the Super Test Manager for North America. So everything that makes it into the game that's new, I make sure that clears all our content checks and it tests out A-OK before you load into battle with it so it doesn't blow up in your face. I also help out with the recruitment too, so I look for any fine players that want to join the Super Test program. So if you think that you're up for a bunch of testing and trying out cool new things, check us out. I spent about 6 years in the Marine Corps. I joined up right out of high school, and I started off in the infantry and eventually worked my way up and became a legal investigator. On behalf of all of our veteran players out there, I wanted to extend a happy Veterans Day to all you guys. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, my friends. Thank you for your service.